So let me ask you a question in the typical style of a faculty first. Can anyone spell Wagadugu for me? No one? All right, let me help you here. Ouagadougou. I was born in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, West Africa, to extremely ingenious and adventurous Indian parents, and brave parents, I must say at that. I use the word brave because at a point in time where no one in their community or beyond had even heard of Burkina Faso, they chose to make Burkina Faso their home. Eventually, of course, we moved from Burkina Faso to Douala, Cameroon, which became my home for the next 16 years. Growing up as a young child in Douala, Cameroon, sources of entertainment were extremely limited. Either we went out and played football on the beach, or we sat at home and read books. Thankfully, my parents were avid readers, and they introduced my sister and me to books from all around the world, including stories from Indian mythology. Sitting on the front porch of our home in Douala, Cameroon, immersed in those magnificent tales, there was a world that was created for me that was full of imagination. A world in which I could actually believe I could become what I wanted to. And whilst reading one of those tales, immersed completely in this imaginative world, I read a phrase, Yad bhavo tat bhavati. You become what you believe. Little did I realize over a period of time what this phrase was going to mean to me. Today, I'm going to tell you 4 beliefs through 4 stories. And these beliefs prove to me what this phrase really means. The first belief, anomalies can breed ambition. As a young 15-year-old growing up in Douala, Cameroon, life was fairly simple. You had your routine, you had friends, you had school, you had your activities. Suddenly, in the middle of all of this, my parents decided to take a very drastic decision. They decided to migrate back to India from Douala, Cameroon. I was horrified. What was wrong with our life here? And why would you do this? I vividly remember spending hours, days and nights crying, begging them to change their mind. In fact, borrowing from some of the stories, I concocted a complete play with my best friend, a young German girl called Maya, to convince her parents to arrange a way in which they could adopt me. None of that worked. Eventually, of course, we had to move back. Moving back was worse than I had imagined. In fact, the 80s and the 90s back then were a very different India. Cultural orthodoxy, societal norms, familiar expectations, the education system, even the language. I had no idea what hit me. In fact, just because of the way I dressed, I looked, I spoke, I wasn't even very popular in school. Actually, the truth is, what was I expecting, right? A girl from Burkina Faso was hardly going to be the most popular girl in school. Having said that, I tried to fit in. Didn't work. Essentially, the cultural shock that I experienced, along with the micro-bullying that happened to me as a young child in school or a young adult in school, made life feel really worse. I started spending more and more time by myself, in the confines of my room, rushing back after school and classes, not wanting to mix with anyone else because nobody really cared for me. And on some days when it became unbearable, I just decided to skip some classes. To add to this misery, within 18 months of moving to the country, my father passed away in an untimely way, leaving my sister, my mother, and I in the throes of despair and uncertainty. Life couldn't have gotten even worse. Once again, I found myself sinking deeper and deeper into the confines of my loneliness in my home. In this unfamiliar, scary world, the only sense of familiarity I did have was my family. And unfortunately, I had part of that taken away from me. But even in those days, I leaned back in heavily on what I did know and what was my comfort zone, reading. I started reading books from all genres, all historical timelines. And when those were over and the content was over, I started reading my textbooks. And I read them over and over again, sometimes out of sheer boredom, sometimes out of interest. Strangely, there was collateral advantage as a result of that, which meant that I was acing my classes. I could answer everything that was being asked, and exams were a breeze. Slowly and steadily, a sense of pride and determination evolved because of the way I was performing academically. It created a little bit of a sense of purpose. Perhaps this pursuit of academic excellence was what was my calling. The more I thought about it, the more it fueled ambition. And slowly and steadily, acing all the classes I took, coming to the top of the class, a gold medal at graduation, a thesis that was published as part of the school project, and eventually the dean's list. Life actually felt good. But here's what I realized, and this was at this juncture that I asked myself, what was it that really fueled this ambition? So eventually, you can look at an anomaly and make something out of it, or think of it as a breaking point and let it sink. Here's the second belief that has transpired through my life. Anomalies can be unsettling, but perseverance is a privilege we can all have. Now, this part of my life is about my 15-year tenure in the corporate world. A rhythmic pattern, settled into typical predictable behavior, a great team to work with, great mentors, financial stability, the opportunity to work with teams across the world, and of course, create impact in the organization I worked for. But then again, over a period of time, that same rhythmic pattern started unsettling me. What was I doing? What was my purpose? What was the purpose of the work I was pursuing? Is this who I wanted to become? These questions rattled me. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to find too many answers. Some questions, of course, were answered through wise texts. The others remain unanswered. In the wake of this unsettlement, I took the drastic decision of quitting my job. Again, an anomaly, but one of my own doing. But trust me, 5 days into that resignation, and I was staring down the rabbit hole, asking myself what I had done. No salary, no meetings, no deadlines, nowhere to go, no identity, definitely no purpose. Had I made a stupid decision? My husband, in fact, saw me scrambling around one day, actually sitting in one corner moping, and asked me a very pertinent question. Have the circumstances for your decision changed? Because if the circumstances of your decision have not changed, then retracing your steps would only mean the same outcomes. I thought about what he asked me, and it made sense. Rather than focus on what I had lost, I thought it might make sense to focus on what I did have. So what did I have? 24 hours to my disposal, the opportunity of recreating those imaginative worlds I had been part of all those years, to do what I wanted to. So I said, let's give it another shot. Some of the questions that had bothered me, unsettled me during my tenure, continued to remain and had sowed seeds of inspiration. I chose to search for the answers to those. What was this purpose that I was looking for? That meant path of research. And the automatic culmination of that was a PhD. Excited with my PhD topic and dissertation idea, I said, let's go marching into universities and institutes. After all, I wanted to do a PhD, right? Well, the choice was easy, the admissions were difficult, virtually impossible. I vividly remember the number of rejections I faced. The only other person I think had as many rejections as me was Abraham Lincoln, because he faced, I think, 14. I had about 28. Why was this happening? Well, corporate India in 2008 was not really ready to discuss purpose at work. And when I presented my idea, workplace spirituality, the search for purpose, it was considered fairly ludicrous. One episode that scarred me was walking into an interview where I began speaking. And after the first 7 minutes, just after my introduction and the mention of the topic, I was escorted outside the room by all the panelists saying, okay, not going to work. One of the panelists walked outside with me, wanting to console me, but not for the rejection. He felt sorry at the choice of my topic. He says, I feel really bad you picked a topic like this. The rejections hurt. It was extremely depressing, especially since I'd built my whole life around this vision and this dream. It was all consuming. But then again, one academician I was in touch with referred me to an institute called the Faith at Work at Princeton. The faculty members over there at Faith at Work were looking for scholars who were willing to experiment and research with them on the topic of workplace spirituality. Luckily, I was one amongst the 3 chosen scholars and went on to complete my dissertation in the area of workplace spirituality, the search for purpose. And in 2015, I completed my PhD. This was the second juncture in my life when I really reflected back on what perseverance really means. You need to have one person who believes in your idea unconditionally. And it's even better if that one person is you yourself. The third belief I'd like to share with you: set goals with your soul. Now, this marks the third tenure of my life. As a freshly minted PhD, it was a chicken and an egg scenario. No one wanted to give me work because I didn't have experience. And because I didn't have work, I didn't have the experience. So almost everything that came my way was pro bono. I had to do it for free. Nonetheless, I flung myself into it. Crazy passion drives crazy impact. One of the pro bono assignments had a senior member of the Maharashtra State Police attending, and he was intrigued by what I was saying. He reached out to me and asked me if I was willing to do some work for his cadets. Pro bono, of course. I readily agreed. One thing led to the other, and over a period of time, I received several recommendations to work across different departments of the defense services. That, of course, gave me the opportunity to build a body of work that eventually became the expertise and the chance to speak about this in different forums. And as they say, one thing leads to the other. As of last week, I had the privilege of presenting my 200th talk on the topic of purpose at work at a conference in Zurich, the 4th continent that has so far yet invited me for this ludicrous topic of mine. When I think back about these 3 life lessons and the beliefs that I have formed through the stories of my life, a sense of familiarity engulfs me. All those stories that I read as a child growing up, my own pursuit for purpose, the academic journey that I undertook, all of that has actually made me who I am today. Finding moments in your life which can become stories to tell. Using those stories to find your search for purpose. Don't wait to find yours either. But here's what I'd like to tell you. Sitting on that front porch of mine where I read the phrase, Yad bhavo tad bhavati, you can become what you believe, I realized that that's exactly the story of my life. Because I believed, I became. But you can too. However, there is a missing 4th belief here. That 4th belief, however, is not supported by my story. In fact, that 4th belief is going to be a story that is crafted here by you today. One of you in this audience is going to grab that story and make it yours, And probably in some day, sometime, be here presenting that story with this belief. And the fourth belief that you need to embrace is be your own anomaly and be the best one that you can be. Thank you.